The Mind Tech Podcast, episode 27, for September 26th, 2013. Crypto Chat. Mind Tech Podcast, episode 27. Here we go. I'm Gareth in Los Angeles, and I'm joined once again by Joe in London. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Gareth. How you doing, man?
Nexus 7, did it arrive? Did it arrive? We're hanging here, dude. We got to know. Did it come?
No. No, it did not come, and it's probably never going to come. And I've made my peace with that. But the funny thing is that my friend who I bought it off was supposed to pay me back half the money. And he's like, oh, dude, it's a really bad week. My car payment came out and I've got no money. And because he works, I won't say exactly where he works, but he works at some sort of department store for basically minimum wage. Right. So I feel really bad taking the money back from him.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's not his fault. I mean,
No, I mean, but it was the deal. Like, I said to him, oh, well, don't worry about it, whatever. He said, but a deal's a deal. And I think he's a bit too proud. Like, we did agree that we would split the risk, so...
Well, dude, I think that if, considering the circumstances, and he is blameless here, if you force him to pay you half that cash back, you're a bit of a fucker.
Well, no, I didn't. I'm not going to force him, am I? In fact, the opposite. I said to him, he contacted me on the Friday and said, "Oh, dude, is it all right if I?" And I just said, "Yeah, whatever, man. If you want to pay me, pay me. But if not, don't bother. It's only money, and I'm not that greedy. It's only 90 quid. It's not, but it does. Annoyingly, it means I've paid 180 quid for an old Nexus.
I know you could have bought a fucking new one for that.
Yeah, well, for 20 more quid, I could have bought the brand new 2013 model.
That is pretty depressing.
Yeah.
You should have just bought the new one and be done with it. Just buy the fucking new one and get it.
I know, I could have gone into Curry's and bought one.
Buy one. Boom, there you go.
And not waited weeks for it not to arrive. But, fuck it, whatever.
Yeah, it is what it is. Just move on. It is a shame, though, but at least you have one. You could always sell that and get a new one, I guess, at a later date, whatever the case may be. You've been playing around with Elementary OS, I see.
Yeah, briefly, because there seems to be a lot of buzz about it. And so I booted it off a USB stick, and it's quite good, I suppose. It's not really for me, but it... Yeah, it seems to be a little bit Mac-like. It's, very Mac-like, really. Yeah. It's got the dock. You installed it, did you, in a VM?
Yeah, because you mentioned it, and I know you were going to talk about it on the show, so I thought it'd be best if I installed it and played around with it a little bit to see, whether it was, great, awesome, or it sucked. So I installed it last night, so I haven't really had a huge amount of time to play around with it, but I did play with it for a little bit. And it's very pretty. It looks very nice. You can see where they're drawing their inspiration from. I mean, that's the nice way of putting it. Or I could just say they're stealing ideas. They're either stealing or being inspired. But even though they are being inspired or stealing, they're not doing that great of a job. Because even though it is pretty and it is nice, compared to regular OS X, it's very clunky and kind of primitive.
Yeah, there's this, and there's also Comis OS, Pear OS. Comis means pear in French, by the way, which is a French distro, although it's obviously in English. If you download the English version, and that's supposed to be based. It's themed to look like OS X.
Yeah, I never understand why they would do that.
I think to ease the transition of someone over.
It's crazy too with every Linux, not Linux distribution, but every. Excuse me, every GUI that you can download and install for Linux, with very few exceptions, has a fucking start button. I mean, to me, that's madness. Why are you copying? Are you copying Windows, or in this case, elementary? You're copying Mac. How about you just have a fucking brain and invent a cool interface? I mean, even though was it GNOME 3.8 is kind of clunky and it takes it to getting used to. I mean, my hat's off to them. At least they're trying something new. They're trying to figure out a new interface design. Even with Unity. I mean, everyone, Unity, I fucking hate Unity. It is shit. At least they're trying something different and not saying, here's the start button. You know, it's like, come on.
Well, I don't know. I can see where you're coming from, but I like the traditional start menu way of doing things. It works for me, right. So I'm not. And that's the thing about Linux. If you
sure,
you generally have that
right.
customization, and you can do whatever you want.
Right.
But the thing that struck me about elementary OS, which I had heard before, is that it's almost impossible to configure it at all.
It's locked down a little bit, right?
Yeah, you either like it how it is, or you use something else.
Right. Now they are in that respect, they are really copying the whole Mac deal. I mean, Macintosh is very much. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can customize your Mac, but by nowhere as close to like Linux, where you can pretty much do anything. With a Mac, there is specific guidelines that this is the way you do things. If you don't like the way this works, or you don't want to do it this way, and you're out of luck. You might want to, get a different OS or something. So for them going down that path, it really does show that they're attempting to copy the whole OS X deal. Another thing that kind of leapt out at me was their browser. What's it called on there? It's called Midori. They have this browser called Midori, right? And I thought, what's that? I never heard of Midori before. What the fuck is that? So I opened the browser, and I'm like, okay, this is very Safari-like. And then I go to the web page and look, and guess what? Yeah, it's based on WebKit, heavily modeled after Safari. The internal guts is basically Safari. But
Chrome
but then again,
as well.
So I was going to say, so is Chrome. Chrome is basically Safari too. It's using the Safari guts with the Google face on it. But that was interesting, why they went with Midori and didn't just put Chromium on it or something like that.
Yeah, or Firefox even. I'm still beating the drum for Firefox, even though it's a bit shit these days.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in the day, Firefox was the shit. That was like, especially if you were living in the Windows world. If you had a Windows PC in like 2003 or something, and you fired it up, and you didn't have fucking Firefox as your default browser, I mean, you're a fucking loser right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you said, let me pull up a web page, and you pull up Explorer, it's like game over right there. You're done.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, fuck, Explorer, what are you doing?
Yeah, but this elementary OS, anyway, it's based on Ubuntu, so it's obviously compatible with all the software that you can get for Ubuntu, and you can do apt-get and all the Debian stuff as well, which is cool. But it uses Gala as its window manager, which I've never seen before. I thought it was GNOME 3 at first.
That's what I thought too, because if you look at the bar at the top, where it's got like the date and applications and everything, that's basically GNOME 3. I mean, it looks just like it.
Yeah, it does seem quite similar, but it's just completely locked down, and you can't really do anything. I tried to do my usual black desktop background, and you can't even do that. Yeah, I'd have to Google for a picture of a black background and use that. So you can't even use solid colors. And yeah,
that's pretty. I don't know. That's nuts.
It's just not very customizable, really.
Well, that may change.
That's what they're going for. So
yeah, they're looking for that kind of lockdown. This is the way we want things to work deal. So we'll see how it goes. It's definitely a very pretty operating system, no question. It looks very nice. And I can see how people, who are like closet wannabe Apple users who have PCs might want to download and install it.
Or rather, people who would like to use a Mac but can't afford one.
Well, the same thing. That's what I just said.
Well, I don't think that makes you any. There's no closet about that. It's there's a lot of people who are just not in a financial position, and they're not in the closet and secretly wanting a Mac. They would love to have one, and they'd probably be very open about it. And if you offered them one for free, they jump at the chance, but because it's just so ludicrously expensive compared to a machine running Windows.
Sure.
Yeah, but anyway.
No, that makes sense. I agree. Like I always say, the main negative on a Mac is the price. They're ridiculously overpriced. Tons of money for what, but as far as I can see, that's the only negative. Other than that, it's the shit.
Yeah. So you got this Wi-Fi pineapple thing.
Yeah.
What's all that about?
So this is something I've been meaning to do for a long time, but never got around to it. But last week I finally thought, what the hell? Let's give it a shot. I'm interested in this. I might give it a go. So there's this device you can get called the Wi-Fi pineapple, and it's basically a mini Wi-Fi router. But it's some people have hacked it and put an open source BIOS on it, where you can use it for man-in-the-middle attacks. Which is pretty fucking amazing. So what you do is, it's just a little box. You plug it into the power, or you can plug it into the USB on your computer to give it power. It's got a little antenna on it, and you connect it from Ethernet. So let me just tell you, there's a million ways you can configure this, but this is the way I set it up. Now, keep in mind, I've only had this for like 3 days, and I'm still trying to figure out, how it all works and what the story is with it and get everything going. So I got my Mac. So I used it on my laptop. So I got my MacBook Pro, and I have Ethernet. So I'm connected to my Wi-Fi network via the Mac, right? So I have internet connectivity from my Mac, and then I share that wireless internet through the Ethernet port on my Mac. So the Ethernet is coming out from the Mac and into the Wi-Fi pineapple, right? So then the Wi-Fi pineapple takes that internet connection from my Mac and broadcasts it via its antenna. Right?
Yeah.
So if you were to come by and park outside my house and fire up your computer and look for Wi-Fi access, you'd see my standard Wi-Fi access point, but also you'd see an access point called Pineapple. Right?
Yeah.
So if you connected your laptop to the Pineapple, you'd be getting access to the internet through my Mac.
Right, and therefore you can do man in the middle.
Right. So therefore, I can intercept and harvest all of the traffic that's going through the Pineapple.
What? Surely that must be a bit illegal.
No, it's not. What's illegal about it?
I'm sure that there's wiretapping laws and all sorts of stuff that would apply to that.
No, not at all. It's fine. I mean, it might be illegal in the totalitarian state formerly known as the United Kingdom, but in the soon-to-be totalitarian state known as the United States of America, it's fine right now.
Okay.
So I'm still trying to figure it out and get it going. So yesterday I plugged it all in and I got it working. And then what you do is on your computer, on my Mac, I fire up a web browser and I go to a specific IP address, which is the IP of the Pineapple, and you can log into the Pineapple, and there you have the whole control deal of shows everything that's running, and you can download all different kinds of applications that you can run from the Pineapple and all that stuff. So then I got my iPhone and I connected to the Pineapple via my Wi-Fi, and then it shows on the screen, boop. I'm connected, and you can see who's connecting and when. You can set up man-in-the-middle attacks so that when somebody connects, if they go to Facebook, it'll harvest their username and password for Facebook or Twitter or pretty much anything they log into.
What about HTTPS stuff, like Gmail, for example? Does it?
I don't know. I've yet to possibly. I don't know. I mean, as I say, I've only had it a day or two, so I haven't really dug down deep into it to figure it all out. But on the very surface, kind of looking through it as I did yesterday, it seems like there's a ton of shit you can do and a lot of disturbing stuff. So if I were to go to like a Starbucks with this thing and have it in my bag and connect it to the Starbucks network, I could essentially, I could name it like Starbucks hotspot or something, and just sit in that coffee shop and just harvest everyone's username and password from pretty much whatever, and take it all.
And how much did you pay for this thing then?
I think it's like $50.
Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty amazing. Now I got this not because I'm out to do, shady bullshit and steal passwords and stuff. I really don't give a fuck about that. I'm doing it because I just found it totally fascinating. Don't you think that's really interesting to do shit like that?
It is interesting. It's interesting to know that anyone else could be doing it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So when you go somewhere and it has public Wi-Fi, you need to be very careful because you could be logging in and it might be one of these little boxes. Now, here's the crazy thing that you can do with it. You don't need it to be connected to a PC. So there's a little USB port on there, and you can plug like one of these little thumb drives in there.
Yeah.
And you can configure it to like sit out there anywhere and just harvest everything and store it on the thumb drive, and you can just pick it up later. So you can buy like this little clamshell box for it with an antenna, and you can buy a battery pack for it. And then you configure it, and you just put it somewhere. And then come back in a couple of days.
But surely it needs to be connected to the internet for it to work.
Right. So what you'd do is you'd place it somewhere, right? Like maybe you go to Starbucks and stick it behind a chair or something, or put it on the roof or wherever you'd hide it away somewhere, right? Yeah. And then you'd go sit in your car and you'd remotely log in to the Pineapple from your laptop, set it all up, configure it, close your laptop and go home. Come back in a day or two and harvest all your goodness that you've taken from everyone using it.
It'd probably just be 1 million Facebook logins and nothing else.
Probably 90+% would be Facebook and Twitter logins, probably.
Yeah.
But think of the fun you could have with that. But there's a lot of stuff you can do with this. It's pretty amazing. And also what I got for it, this is kind of interesting too, is I got an Alfa Wi-Fi extender.
All right.
Let me tell you the exact model I got. Hang on. I don't have it in front of me, but I can pull it up real quick. Hang on. Let's see. So this Wi-Fi extender, you can use this in conjunction with the Pineapple to extend its range. But you can also use it. So I got an Alfa AWU S036NHA. And this is basically just a little tiny little black box with one of these Wi-Fi antennas on it and a USB cable. So you plug the USB cable into your PC, and it basically pulls in Wi-Fi signals from all around you. And you can plug this into an external antenna if you wanted to put a big antenna on your roof or something, so you can pull in Wi-Fi from miles away. So let me just tell you exactly what I went through with this. Now, here's the deal. This little box is not compatible with OS X. Okay? There are no drivers for it. Trust me, I scoured the fucking net like you wouldn't believe looking for drivers for this thing. My only hope is because it uses the Atheros chipset, is that Hackintosh builders out there who are trying to configure Wi-Fi for certain brands of laptops with their OS X Hackintosh. If they have Atheros Wi-Fi chips in their Hackintosh, someone will write a driver for it, and then I can go ahead and steal that driver from the Hackintosh build and use that to access this thing directly from the Mac. So because there's no drivers for it in the Mac, if I plug it into the USB on my MacBook Pro, it's like nothing, right? Doesn't light up, zero. Doesn't even recognize it. Now, the only drivers that are available for it are Windows drivers. So I could download the driver, fire up a Windows virtual machine, plug it in, and away you go. But what I did discover is that this thing works flawlessly with Linux. And with no drivers, you don't need nothing. You just plug the fucking thing in, and you're good to go.
So there's drivers in the kernel, that means, yeah.
Right, yeah. So what I did was I plugged it in. I thought, well, let me try Linux. So I fired up Ubuntu virtual machine, and it came up and said, oh, USB detected. So I said, okay, send it to Linux. Boom. And then all of a sudden, Wi-Fi appears in Linux. I hit the pull down on the Wi-Fi in Ubuntu, and it lists all the Wi-Fi base stations in my area. Now check this shit out, and this is amazing. This is just sitting at my desk with this little thing right next to me with the antenna on it. So on my MacBook Pro, right? A MacBook Pro comes with, I think it's BG and N Wi-Fi, right? But it's all built into the machine. So when I go and I log on to my Wi-Fi, it usually lists maybe 3 or 4 different Wi-Fi stations around me, right? And one of those is obviously mine and has the strongest signal. And all the others are like maybe the guy across the street, next door, whatever. But usually there's about 3 or 4, say 4. So technically 3 because one of them is mine. When I plug this fucking thing in and I fire up Linux, suddenly there's like 15 base stations that appear.
All right.
It's pulling them in from, you wouldn't believe it. Unbelievable.
All right. So if you've got, in my case, for example, a brick wall between my router and my bathroom, then this might boost it sufficiently to get through that then.
Yeah, it might very well do that. But it pulls in signal for, and I was thinking, if I put like an external antenna, if I bought one of these 9 dB antennas, you know, the ones that are like, I don't know, maybe 12 or 15 inches tall, and put that like outside or something, fuck me. Who knows what I'd pick up.
Incidentally, in Linux, there's this thing called NDIS wrapper, or NDIS wrapper. I've never said it before. And that allows you to use Windows drivers for Wi-Fi cards in Linux. So I'm wondering if there's some equivalent for that for the Mac, perhaps.
I don't know, and because these Wi-Fi extenders, they're for the Mac side, it's not really that popular. I guess a lot of people with Macs aren't too bothered. They're either plug it into Ethernet or just connect it to their deal. They're not out there trying to pull Wi-Fi from wherever.
Yeah. So you should look into it anyway.
Yeah.
And see if you might. I've had a very quick look into it now, and I can't see anything. But you might find that there is something you could use to use the Windows drivers on the Mac.
Possibly. Like with this thing here, if I was in like a rural area and I needed free internet access, if I had this little box and I connected it to a big ass antenna on the roof, dude, I'd be set.
Except that most people have WPA these days.
Well, that's when I pull the out of the 15 or 16 that it listed, they were all locked. But there are ways around that.
There are. I mean, with WEP, it's quite easy.
Yeah.
To break it, but with WPA, it's a lot harder. It's a lot more involved. It takes a lot longer.
So it's like if a lot of people. I mean, I know that my wife, when she was where she was working, there was a house across the street that they just had like, I guess, a Netgear router. They just plugged it in, and that was it. So she would go to work and fire up her MacBook and hop onto their network, and away you go. But now she's moved to a different location where she doesn't have access. So I was thinking, maybe with this little box, she might be able to pull it in. But here's the thing: she'd have to run Linux to pull it in, or Windows with the driver, and that shit ain't happening. So. We shall see, but I'll probably have more to report on these things over the next few weeks as I start to really dig into it and play around with it.
Yeah. So before we get to our interview, then, shall we do some news?
Sure. Mind Tech Podcast. Here is the news. So what we got, Joe?
Well, the first one's quite funny. iPhone 5S fingerprint reader hacked.
Yay!
Who saw this coming, eh?
I don't know.
It turns out that this German group of hackers called the Chaos Computer Club,
right,
who it was well known before that fingerprint readers were hackable.
Yeah. By
just pretty much taking a photograph and then printing that out high resolution and using some cream and just some various things anyway.
Well, that's essentially what they did with this too.
Yeah, and it turns out that all they had to do was up the resolution. Apple was going on about, this is uncrackable and blah, blah, blah. No, and it turns out it's pretty high resolution.
Wait. Let's try and be as accurate as possible.
Okay.
No, they did not say this is uncrackable.
What did they say?
They said it was secure.
Well, it fucking isn't, is it? So.
Well, I mean, your front door is secure, but if someone wants in, they're getting in. Right?
Yeah.
So they never said it was uncrackable. Okay, go ahead.
So it turns out all they had to do is print it a little bit higher resolution, and then it works, no problem. But what it illustrates, in Apple's defense, you have to have, obviously, physical access to the device, and you have to be able to have someone's fingerprint. And no one has yet managed to extract a fingerprint from an iPhone yet.
Right. So all this is saying is that, yes, there is a way around it. But what a fucking way, dude. Number one, you need physical access to the device. Then, have you seen the steps that are involved to get this shit going?
Yeah, it's quite involved.
This is a big, massive pain. You got to really want to get into their phone to do this. Yeah. There's like 50 steps to this thing.
But the key is, the key take-home point is that the biometrics are not a good security method, because there's no secret to biometrics. It's a public, it's a thing that never changes. It's not like a password that if it's compromised, you can change it.
Absolutely.
Your fingerprints, unless you dip them in fucking bleach or something.
No, you're absolutely correct.
Soda, then that's it. Your fingerprint is your fingerprint. And same with the heartbeat stuff with the ECGs, unless you have a heart attack and then it changes forever, apparently. And the point is that it's not a good idea to start using these things for security. And passwords and PIN codes and patterns and things that are unique and not... it's not about being unique, because a fingerprint is unique and a heartbeat's unique. But it's about that a fingerprint, all you have to do is take a glass that I've been drinking out of, or a door that I've touched, and I leave my fingerprints everywhere I go, and my heartbeat's something you could listen to relatively easily.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. You're absolutely correct. So, I mean, this is something that is a definite issue. But here's the thing, though, is this is something that Apple is trying out. They've made it as secure as they can. Now, for Mr. and Mrs. Joe Average out there, this is fine. It's going to work fine. If there are major security issues with this, and if it's shown to be something that is putting up a lot of red flags, Apple will drop this in a heartbeat. They're not tied to this we got to support this, and no. If this doesn't work, the next iPhone will not have this feature. End of story.
Well, we'll see.
Because then they're notorious for doing that. For if something is a problem or something that's old, or they're not going to support it. If they'll drop it like a hot potato, it'll be done, and on to the next. They're not.
Well, what's an example of something that they've dropped like that then?
Well, they did it with the operating system. They've done it with a ton of what was that? The Wi-Fi, not the Wi-Fi, the Hi-Fi, the Apple Hi-Fi. There's a ton of products that they've released, and either they didn't sell well, or there was issues with them, and they were like, okay, well, we gave it a shot, didn't work, next.
So that could happen again with this then?
Absolutely. They're not tied to it. If this is successful and it works and everyone loves it, it's not going nowhere. If it isn't, it'll be gone. They'll drop it in 2 seconds. On to the next.
Yeah. It's funny, though, that there's also been, this week since the release of the 5S, reports of being able to bypass the lock screen and get into the phone, and also to make phone calls, non-emergency phone calls, using a bug in the emergency phone call.
That's happened a couple of times, though. I think it happened with iOS 5 and iOS 6.
You think they would have learned then?
Well, I mean, it's been totally retooled. I'm sure that the issue that they have now is not the same as the previous. I mean, it's the same issue, but the way you get in is probably not the same as they did it in the past. It's a different way to do it, and it'll be patched. They'll do a 7.1 or something, which will make it go away.
Yeah, but it just seems a bit. I was talking about it last week about Apple starting to slip, and I know that you disagree with me, but I think that their standards are slipping. And that they are, they were. I can't think of a way to describe it really, but they were kind of.
Well, this is the way it works. All right, look at some like Google. Google will make something, and it won't be entirely baked, right? It'll be good enough, but there will be lots of issues, and they'll think, okay, we'll release it. So they release it, people use it, find out all kinds of problems, which is essentially doing the research for Google, and then they're like, okay, let's fix it, right? So they release something that's not ready for prime time. People use it, they fuck it up, they find problems, Google responds and fixes it and moves on. Apple doesn't do that. Apple will only release something when they've got to a point where they feel that it's perfect, right? So they'll get to that point and think, okay, this is it. We're good to go. This is the gold master. This is perfect. We'll release it. And then slowly over time, people will figure out, oh, this is wrong. This is wrong. That's wrong. Oh, okay. We missed that. Let's fix it.
I still see this as a sign of Apple slipping, to be honest. Slipping from their position of number one and being the best at doing what they do and charging a premium price for it. Whereas the fact that they brought out the two phones it goes against what they have done before. And I don't think that was a good idea. And I think that if Steve Jobs was still around, things would be different, basically, because he was such a genius businessman that he would have been... Things would have been different and better for Apple, and I see this as this release and right now as kind of a turning point for Apple, if you ask me. It might be a very long turn, and it might take a long time for them to lose their crown as the top technology company in this sector. But it's happening, man.
Yeah, I completely disagree with you. I think you're
well, you would, wouldn't you?
No, it's not that. I mean, if of course, it's not that I would. I mean, of course, Apple can fail. Of course, I just don't think they are right now.
I'm not saying that they are failing right now, but I think that the smallest cracks are starting to appear.
Dude, they sold over 9 million phones in 2 days. They had people waiting around the block for hours and hours and hours to get these phones.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that
when
they
did that happen
have...
with some Samsung piece of garbage or the fucking Nexus? I'll tell you when. Never.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, that right now we are still in these times when these things happen. But there are tiny cracks are starting to appear in Apple where that won't be the case in the future. Where we are now won't be the case in the future. And I'm not saying that they've gone to shit or whatever, but I think that the tiniest signs of them going to shit have started to appear. And what was formerly a flawless armor is starting to have tiny chinks in it.
I disagree. I think nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. I mean, obviously, could they fail in the future? Absolutely. Could they lose their crown? Of course. There's no doubt. In fact, it probably will happen. I just don't see it happening right now.
Well, they're not as bad as Canonical, but then Canonical with Ubuntu never were anywhere near there. And I've made it clear that my prediction is by the end of this decade, Ubuntu won't exist as it is now. I don't think it's anything as dramatic as that. I think that it'll be a slight wane in sales and popularity, and maybe another company might come in and do something.
The thing with Ubuntu, though, is that everyone loves Ubuntu Core. They just hate Unity.
Yeah, more or less.
You know,
people like Linux Mint, which is obviously based on it. And
the Ubuntu Core, the OS without the GUI, everyone loves that shit. They're eating it up. But Unity is it ain't happening. Most people.
But it isn't only that, because in the core OS they're changing things, like instead of going to Wayland like everyone else, they're going to Mir, and
I think that's awesome though.
I don't.
When has the majority ever been right? Let me think about it. Right, if everyone says yes, we should do this, I guarantee you, whatever they're saying we should do is the wrong thing to do. Always, in everything you can think of.
Really?
Yeah.
Can't think of any examples of where the majority is right.
Well, tell me one.
Good point, I suppose. I can't think of anything.
Yeah, the majority are always... the majority is packed with cowards and fucking imbeciles.
Okay, what about the majority of servers on the internet running some sort of Unix rather than Windows.
Right, but that wasn't a majority move, though. That just happened. It wasn't like one day everyone said, okay, we're all running Unix. Let's go. It just kind of happened over time.
Yeah.
You know, there was no like uniform decision. Tomorrow, we're switching everything to Unix.
Yeah, but it's still the majority. If you were going to set up a server now...
Right, but that naturally happened over time, though. That's not a majority move.
Yeah, but you would go with the majority, though, wouldn't you? If you were setting up a web server now...
Yeah.
Supposing you had a great idea for a website and you needed to set up a dedicated server for it or servers for it, then you would go with the majority, wouldn't you?
But that's done. It's already it's passed. I'm talking about like if something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Well, I feel too weak to argue today.
Okay, but I have a cool little clip here from some of the chaos that erupted last week when they released the iPhone 5. Now, the main Apple store in Pasadena, which is my local Apple store, this happened. Have a listen to this.
Frenzy over the new iPhone is nothing new, but it reached a whole new level today in Pasadena. Eyewitness News reporter Rudabeh Shabazi is live at that Apple store where police even had to break up some fights and make arrests. Rudabeh?
Ellen, we're told an estimated 100 people were shuttled in vans from Skid Row to wait in line overnight last night. And then this morning, not one, not two, but 3 brawls caught on camera as things got hectic. Some were led away in cuffs and others in line could only stand by and watch. The competition for new iPhones is routine, with people waiting in line all night for the release of the iPhone 5C and 5S. But this crowd got rough.
Get out of the way. Get out of the way.
Made 3 arrests after a man slammed himself against this truck, and 2 women, one of them pregnant, fought on the sidewalk while their boyfriends brawled in the street. They say they and dozens of other people were shuttled in from Skid Row by this man to wait in line all night to buy phones.
I buy phones.
You buy phones?
I buy phones.
What do you do? What?
And I resell them.
What do you do?
A lot more.
When Apple corporate shut him down and only allowed him to buy about a dozen iPhones, he refused to pay those who had waited and didn't get iPhones. He had to be escorted out by police for his own safety when people started grabbing the phones from his hands.
You cannot take nobody money and kick them out.
Advertisement.
Yes.
Got us down here. We spend the night all night.
Last night.
We got no money. We got nothing.
Said if we'd sit here in line and each of us get 2 tickets, he'd pay each of us money to come and sit and get these cards for him for a phone. And now all of us sit here all night, and now he's backing out? That's bull.
For some other tired people in line who witnessed the violent chaos, it might be their last overnight wait.
It's just annoying to hear all this ruckus all night, yelling, cussing, smoking cigarettes, and it's secondhand smoke, so it's not okay.
Others, though, like Francisco Naranjo, who got the first iPhone 5S from the store, came out victorious.
I think for me it's pretty fun. Unfortunately, some other people had to pay for it, but at this time, you just always have some kind of action going on.
And we did reach out to Apple for comment on the incidents today, but have not heard back from them yet. And as you can see, right now it's a lot calmer, more of what you would expect to see at the release date of a new iPhone. There's a heavy security and police presence here still at this hour. And we're told the wait time at this point is about 30 minutes as they reassess their stock. Reporting live in Pasadena, Rudabeh Shabazi, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Incredible, Rudabeh. Thank you so much.
And now we go live to the Nokia Windows Phone release. So what do you think of that, man?
All I could think of was rise, 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 rise of the idiots. Fucking idiots, every single one of them, man. Fucking fighting over phones. What's wrong with them?
But see, that was the scam, though. This dude, he paid all these homeless people to stay overnight. Because what they do, if you stay overnight, they give you like a coupon which guarantees you an iPhone. So he goes down to Skid Row in downtown LA. He grabs all these fucking mental homeless people and says, look, I'll pay you whatever, $100 or whatever. Stay overnight, get the ticket so I can go buy the phones. So they all camp out and they're all, like I said, smoking and swearing and drinking and all fucking filthy, haven't washed for weeks, whatever. And it backfired, so it got violent.
Just the fact that can go on, just, oh, man, I despair, I really do. How can we be in a situation, how can we live in a world where that goes on? In a world
where that goes on. No,
exactly. It's fucking foreign. I mean, yeah, it might be a nice foreign or whatever, but Jesus Christ, people need to learn some patience. And
I did it once. I mean, I didn't stay overnight, but I did wait in line for a couple of hours to get...
Didn't you feel like a fucking idiot?
No, it was great. It was awesome. I mean, you're talking to everyone there. It was a great atmosphere. It was cool. But I did it the one time just to do it. There's no way I'd do it again.
Yeah.
There's no way.
So are you going to get yours then?
Yeah, I will get one. I don't know when yet, though, because right now they're like gold, especially the gold one. The gold one is like...
Yeah, I hear that. Who wants a fucking gold phone?
That thing is flying off the shelves like there's no tomorrow. You cannot find them anywhere.
It's just a bit tacky, isn't it? A gold phone.
I wouldn't get one. I'm just going to get the standard black or the space gray.
Yeah. Well, so moving from your love to my love then.
Okay.
Steam's got its own operating system now.
Yeah, this is great.
It hasn't been released yet, but they've announced that Steam OS, which is what sounds like it's going to be a very minimal Linux,
right?
That's just got Steam. It'll probably just boot into a full screen.
See, now it makes sense. Now it all comes together. Why they put Steam on Linux? Because they wanted to test it out, see what they could do. That was their end game. Their end game was to make a little box that you'd plug into your Ethernet or your Wi-Fi and plug the other end into your TV and play all your PC games on your big screen TV.
Yeah, and the thing is that they've gone for this open source model where they produce this operating system and then throw it out there, and then any manufacturer can chuck it on their device.
Sure.
And because it's all GPL licensed, it's all free for them.
Yeah.
And any consumer, I could put it on my device, on my PC. And I think that gamers are going to go mad for it, man.
Oh, I agree, yeah, because you can build your own custom box, right? You could make it kind of beefy, great graphics card, processor, ton of RAM, little small form factor. Plug that in, HDMI, your big screen TV, throw this OS on it, and boom, you got a killer gaming rig.
Yeah, or even just not even a small form factor, just a normal.
Yeah,
instead of it's on your existing gaming PC rather than running Windows on it, you just throw this OS on it.
Totally.
And yeah, man, it's great, and it's going to be good for Linux generally, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
It's going to improve the driver support and everything.
Absolutely. Now, are they going to come out with their own machine, or is it just going to be the OS that you'd have to purchase or build your own machine?
Well, they're probably announcing that while we're talking right now, because it was due to be announced today. There's three...
The Steam box, right?
Yeah, the Steam box is probably going to be announced. So by the time anyone's listening to this, it probably has been announced, but it hasn't as we're talking now. Cool. So everyone's expecting there to be a Steam box. But it's interesting that they've gone this Linux route, and instead of just having a lockdown proprietary Steam box, they'll say, well, here is a Steam box, or you can build your own Steam box using Steam OS.
To go the Linux route it makes sense, right? Because it's free, so they don't have to deal with that. Plus, they have a massive user base that will test their shit for them, so they don't have to hire people to test it to see if it works or to look for bugs, because they got the community to do it for them. So, I mean, financially and work-wise, it makes a ton of sense to go Linux.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also, it's win-win for them. The more people use Steam, the more likely they are to buy games from them.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
So, yeah, it's a cool development, I think.
I agree.
Storman wouldn't agree, because he would say that it's all running proprietary shit, and that's no good.
Yeah.
And all these games are proprietary and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But I think that it's good. I think that a move away from Windows, and if people who don't care about operating systems will play their games on Steam on Linux, Steam OS, and they realise, hang on, this is running better than it is on Windows. Maybe I'll check out Linux for general computing as well.
This is a death nail not only for Windows, but for things like the Xbox One and the PS4 and things of that nature. Because, I mean, I'm not a gamer, so I don't regularly play games or keep up to date with, what's the latest, greatest game shit that's out there. But in the past, when I've played games, I've always found that the game played on the PC is usually vastly superior to that same game played on a console.
Well, yeah, because consoles are a snapshot of hardware at the time that they are released. And then, I mean, how long has the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 been out?
Oh, wow.
Years and years and years.
Yeah.
Whereas PC hardware incrementally gets better and better. Graphics cards get better, processors get better, RAM gets faster.
Evolves, right.
So, yeah, maybe. I don't think it's going to be the death knell. If they can make it so that the existing controllers are compatible with the Steam OS and Steam Box and whatever, then that might signal the death knell, because people often will choose their console based on the controller. If you are used to the feel of that in your hands.
Sure.
If you're a PC gamer and you're used to mouse and a keyboard, obviously you can get all these gamer mouse and gamer keyboard and with light up and all the rest of it. But if Xbox there's one standard controller for that, and people are used to the feel of that in their hand, and if they can't use that to play games, then they're not going to use any other platform.
Yeah.
And similarly, there's PlayStation hardcore people who won't play Xbox because they say, it's too big and chunky, doesn't fit in my hands properly.
Right. Yeah. There's you get used to doing it a certain way, and to change, while it's possible, it's always a hassle. You're reluctant to do it, even though it might ultimately be beneficial. You're like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and they also have to license all of the games, like GTA 5 that we touched on last week.
Yeah.
If you can play GTA 5 and then you can just, if there's a simple menu, just go in and select your controller type.
That'd be great.
So, yeah. So you can select Xbox 360 controller type,
totally.
GTA 5, and start playing it. Then who's going to argue with that? And if they can,
it's going to be
undercut the price as well.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Is if. I mean, the OS is probably going to be free, right? So anyone can download it and throw it on their PC. Now, if they can release the Steam Box for something very, very cheap, like if you could buy like a Steam Box for, I don't know, $100, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, imagine how many people are going to be getting into that shit.
Well, yeah, if they can undercut the hardware, but also I was thinking if they can undercut the games cost as well, because it's all digital delivery. And no discs. I mean, it's just crazy to me that you still have to go and buy a disc of something.
If you're already a Steam user and you buy one of these Steam boxes and hook it up to your TV, all your games are ready to go.
Yeah, all the games that you've already bought with the humble indie bundle games and the existing games,
you're set.
You better play them on. Yeah,
totally awesome. All right, then let's take a little break, and then we'll come back with a very special interview about encryption. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. This is Gareth from MindsetCentral.com. Just coming on really quickly to talk to you about subscribing or donating to Mindset Central. Right now, we average about 17 brand new podcasts a month on Mindset Central, and that's for free. So you get that content for free. It always has been free, and it will continue to be free. But just take a moment to imagine the time and the effort it takes to put all that together, plus also creating, building, sustaining the website and the server costs. We're constantly finding ourselves reaching the point that sometimes is the breaking point, and we're up against that old foe of time and money. And we're hoping that with your help, we can break through this wall. Not only do we want to continue with Mindset Central, but we want to build upon it and create something very special on the internet. So please think about helping us and becoming a subscriber. By becoming a subscriber to Mindset Central, you'll have access to the subscriber section, which provides exclusive, all-new podcasts and a lot more. The subscriber section has and will continue to grow into an area that you will want to be a part of. And with monthly access, priced at that of a large coffee at Starbucks. So for one coffee, you get access to the subscriber section, packed with content that is continually added to on a weekly basis. So please help us. Help us by becoming a subscriber. Thank you. And we're back. All right, Joe. Now, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we have a special guest on this week's edition of the Mind Tech Podcast. A few weeks ago, I was kind of schooled on what we said about encryption on one of the shows, and we started a brief Twitter conversation. We talked about this a week or two ago on the show, and we reached out to this person and asked him if he wanted to come on the show to kind of get us on the right track as far as encryption. And luckily for us, he agreed. So, Joe, we're going to bring in Devolve05. That's his Twitter handle, by the way. He's otherwise known as Paddy. And talk about encryption and what are his crypto skills, so to speak. I want to see if we're doing it right. So let's bring him in. Hey, Devolve05, or should we call you just Paddy?
Paddy's good, Gareth. Thank you.
Well, it's great for you to come on the show, man. We really, really appreciate it. I know you've been listening for a couple of weeks, and you've heard us ramble on about encryption and why it's important. But tell us a little bit about yourself, about your crypto background, so to speak. What got you into encryption?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, I think, is the lack of encryption background. If you think about my work background, I've been in ICT for about 30 years now. Started off coding and doing support, then ended up running support teams and development teams for some very large blue chip companies in this country. Sorry, this is in the UK. And throughout all of that time, the absence of crypto was noticeable. I think it's come very much to the fore with obviously all the Snowden revelations lately. But whilst I was involved in corporate IT, the focus was very much on authentication. That was the big one that people worried about from a security point of view, and network perimeter security. And that was really as far as it went. And if people were thinking about crypto in any way, shape or form, it was just by way of encrypting Word documents and Excel spreadsheets, using the built-in tools that Microsoft gives you.
So that's basically.
Other than that,
I was going to say that's just basically.
Sorry, Gareth.
I was just going to say that's just basically saving your Word file and adding a password, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And other than that, apart from when dealing with things like back systems, which is a payment clearing system, a financial payment clearing system, which obviously does have some element of cryptography involved in it, the safe transport. People sort of viewed people who used PGP or GPG really. They were sort of out of there. Sort of, what the hell are you doing? There's no need for this. Fine that you send an email to someone that's not encrypted. Anyone in between you and the recipient can access it, but nobody really gave it much consideration. I think the environment's changed a bit in the last few months, to be honest.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Only in the last few months has it changed. I was going to mention, as you mentioned, you've worked in IT for the last 30 years or so. Do you recall the crypto wars of the 90s when PGP was finally released?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Interesting time for Mr. Zimmerman, and all the arms control aggravation from your fine government.
Because I remember when all that was going on, I remember dabbling with PGP in the mid-'90s and fooling around with it. And I remember the U.S. having very strict laws that the technology could not be exported. And I always remember thinking, and I think this was probably around 98, 99, when the law went away and they said, oh, okay, you can export it now. I remember thinking at the back of my mind, like, why are they doing that? Is something going on here that shouldn't be? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I'm sure later on we'll be getting to a question of trust, which is at the heart of all of these discussions, and I mean, the bottom line is you can't trust anybody.
Right.
But I mean, we've obviously got no reason not to trust PGP, for instance. I mean, Phil Zimmerman's a very well-respected individual, and the company Silent Circle that he helped found is a well-respected company. As I'm sure you're aware, they recently pulled one of their products before they felt the force of your government on them. But yeah, I mean, who can you trust? Right. Is the bottom line in all of this.
So let's talk a little bit about your setup. What kind of hardware and software do you primarily use to get your private secure communication deal going?
Well, let me back up a stage here, because I'm quite old and decrepit now, being about 50 years old, and I think how I approach crypto these days is different from how perhaps the younger generation ought to be approaching it. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not one of those people who is one of those if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear people, because quite clearly you have. However, at the stage of life I'm at, to be honest, I'm not that concerned about what the government can see that I do. I'm not doing all sorts of shady stuff. So my setup is perhaps not indicative of the kind of information you're thinking about. My life cannot really be ruined by the government, which is one of the things that hasn't come out in any of the Snowden revelations so far, and I suspect it probably won't. I mean, I understand that all the information that Mr. Greenwald's putting out there is information that Snowden took from an internal website from the NSA. So it's stuff that they don't mind their employees knowing about. Now, the stuff that I think would be very interesting for all of us to hear about is the information that the higher-ups in the NSA don't wish their employees to know about, and they're the uses of the surveillance that they're undertaking, which I suspect is towards people's financial transactions, whether any information is used for blackmail purposes, etc. I mean, you hear stories that judiciary are not allowed to be appointed in the States unless they actually have got some black marks against them, because it makes them controllable in the future. I mean, all this is obviously hearsay, and I doubt very much that we're going to get any stories from Glenn Greenwald about any of this stuff, because it will not be publicly available within the NSA. But talking back around to where I started, where I am in life at the moment, there's not a lot of damage that a government could do to me. So my setup isn't, I don't think, of huge relevance. Well, the younger generation I'm concerned about, because if you think that, or if you've got even the slightest inkling that these facilities, the NSA, GCHQ and what have you, are using, are not just purely for tracking terrorists or keeping an eye on the populace as a whole, which is a bad enough thing, but that they are going to be used for other purposes, more nefarious purposes, then you need to start thinking about your privacy and your online activities a lot earlier in life, because it's not necessarily what you're doing today.
It's what you did in the past. It's going to
impact you today. It's how it's going to impact you in the future.
Well, also, I mean, you mentioned that, there's nothing the government could do to you to ruin you or whatever, and that's probably true. I mean, we're not up to any shady nonsense either, but that's not really the point. No,
it isn't the point. I mean, you can take a view that stuff that you wish to stay private should stay private.
Right.
If you're talking to a friend or a relative about a personal condition, like you've got a personal medical condition or what have you, that should stay private, and you certainly don't want it to get into a health insurer's hands, for instance.
Exactly.
So yeah, I can see your point of view as well. But I mean, perhaps. I was going to say I'm a little bit blasé now, but there comes a point where my concern, isn't really for me anymore. But it's how the younger generation, and because if you look at the pace of change in these technologies and the capabilities, and you're just referring back to the 90s. I mean, 20 years ago, and you think what the capabilities were then and what they are now.
Oh, it's night and day.
20 years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in 20, 30 years from now, it's like, what's the world going to look like? You want to jump in here, Joe? Any questions?
Yeah, it sounds to me, Paddy, that this is a very roundabout way of saying that you use Windows.
You'd be wrong. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I do use Windows when I have to use Windows, much like yourself. My main box happens to be a Ubuntu, same as you.
Yes. In your face, Gareth.
And I run a variety of other distros, depending on what I'm trying to do. And I'm sure when we talk about actual systems that can help you stay private and give you some security online, then obviously Linux distros are sort of got to be key to the mix there.
So let's talk about that. What kind of hardware? What kind of hardware, OS? What kind of stuff you got going?
Right. As I say, I don't think you want to know about the kit I've got sat in front of me at the moment because it's not really important. But what I would say is, if we're talking about someone who is serious about their security and has, let's back up a stage. You've got to ask why you're serious about your security for a start. If it's from your point of view, Gareth, that you just don't want people knowing about, say, the contents of your emails and what have you, then fine, let's do all this on our home kit. Let's use products like Tor and what have you for browsing. We can use Mixmaster for anonymous emailing, what have you. That's all fine and dandy, and will give you a certain level of comfort and some security. But if you have proper security for whatever reason, then you don't want to be doing anything on your home kit whatsoever. You need a separate device that's never used for anything apart from your secure communications.
So essentially you'd have one PC that you use just for your standard, Facebook, surfing, Twitter, whatever, and then another computer that's separate that would be used primarily just for your security.
Absolutely, and not even primarily just. That's the key. It's got to be just used for security. Much like we're talking about when you talk about mobile phones and you talk about burner phones, you really need a burner PC that you take out of the house, you go down to the coffee shop. You don't go in the coffee shop if it's anything like the UK where they're full of CCTVs. You sit outside, you connect outside, you boot it off a Linux distro like Tails or Whonix. So nothing's ever stored on a hard disk. In fact, ideally, you wouldn't even have a hard disk in the machine. You just boot off a CD-ROM, so there's no writable media at all. You do your business, you log off, and you're safe, and you never use that machine for anything else.
What about the idea of using, say, a machine that isn't connected to the network to encrypt your stuff and then putting that on a flash drive, copying it over to a computer that is on the network? Is that not good enough?
Yeah. It's depending on what you're actually worried about. I mean, flash drives are... I've heard people talk about this. I mean, in fact, Bruce Schneier's spoken about it recently. That's how he's been dealing with the Snowden files that he's got from The Guardian. That's all well and good, providing no one's got physical access. Let's talk about USB drives. USB drives are not the most secure things to be having anything privacy-related stored on. Not if you're wanting to be able to safely erase them afterwards. If you have a quick Google around, you'll find that it's been shown to be very difficult to securely erase a USB drive, for instance, because the drive controller is in the middle and it doesn't necessarily allow you to overwrite the parts of the drive that are containing the data you want. And it's the same story with...
You can always blend it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that is the traditional security method, isn't it? With the big hammers, as The Guardian found out.
Yeah, they're so cheap now. For £3 or £4, you can get a 4 or an 8 gig drive. So if you're really, really serious, like dealing with the Snowden stuff, then you could just use them as burners, as you say. Literally, just once you've copied and sent your stuff, stick it in a blender.
Absolutely.
Crush it.
Just destroy it completely.
Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to get around to is you've got to have a sensible view of the threat. So you've got to understand whether people are going to be coming into your house or not, which for the majority of us, they're obviously not. And you've got to have a sensible view I mean, if someone's got physical access to your media, you're screwed anyway at the end of the day.
Well, it's like they've always say, if you are targeted, there's pretty much nothing you can do.
Absolutely. This wraps in nicely with the whole NSA story we're hearing about. The fact that it is largely untargeted, the collection, in fact, it's a very untargeted collection, but without targeting, the quality of the intelligence you can actually derive from that is very minimal, which brings us back to sort of the suspicions that the intelligence is going to be used in, or the information is going to be used in other ways in the future. And so I mentioned CCTV earlier. If you look at what's happened in the UK, which I know is a different situation in the States, because I don't believe you've got quite as many cameras possibly about the places we have.
They're here, but nowhere near as crazy as over there.
Yeah, and that's why you're nowhere near as safe as we are here.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I mean, CCTV, study after study has shown that it does not deter crime in any particularly great measure whatsoever. And what it's used for predominantly is catching people after the event. So it's not to keep you safe, but it's just to make law enforcement's job easier. And you could say the same is very true of what the intelligence services are doing, collecting all this information. It doesn't help them stop a Boston Marathon bombing, but it helps them after the event link people together so that potentially they can round up, if there's a group of people working together, they can round them all up. So it's actually used in a different manner from the one that we're sold it on. Yeah,
it prevents nothing. I mean, one of the old things that I've always said about CCTV is that, like, liquor stores over here in the States have had CCTV since, like, the 70s, but they're still routinely robbed.
Yeah.
It doesn't prevent anything. So what do you mainly run? Let's talk about your hardware. You say you run the Ubuntu OS. What do you got for hardware there? You have a desktop, laptop, or all of the above?
I've got all of the above. I've got a couple of PCs and a laptop. The laptop's running Windows 7, much to your horror.
At least it's not Windows 8.
Oh God, no! Sorry, that would be a step too far. But no, it's whatever you need to do the job. I mean, things have got a lot better in the Linux world, as I'm sure Gareth, Joe's been trying to tell you over the weeks and months that you've been doing the podcast. But as I'm sure, but you're well aware, it's nowhere near. In some areas, certainly, and Joe talks about audio, and there's a whole heap of things. Gaming still, even though Steam is coming on well on Linux now.
Yeah, and obviously Steam OS as well, which is been
absolutely
announced.
Yes, yeah,
very very interesting development.
Yeah, I've always said though, as far as Linux, I mean, I have no beef with the operating system whatsoever. I think the operating system is awesome. It's the applications I have issues with.
Absolutely, and this is what saddens me most about. I know we're going off topic here slightly, but it saddens me about the whole Ubuntu saga. I mean, I've been using Ubuntu since 2008, 2009, 2009, I think it was. And come 2010, back into 2010, 1010 probably, it was looking a really sharp operating system, a few rough edges, but it was getting close to sort of being usable by Joe Public. And then they went and messed around with where the buttons are and started on the Unity business and took the whole thing backwards. I mean, there was an opportunity there.
I don't know if you heard, Gareth found a 1010 disc not too long ago while he was clearing out his place.
Right.
What did you think of that then, Gareth? Was it all right?
Yeah, it was cool. It installed the installer was just like installing 1304. Installed fine. It run great. It looked nice. It was great. Couldn't update it though.
Yeah, well, obviously because it's out of support. But I mean, Paddy, as you say, that was the turning point, wasn't it? Where it just went shit, basically.
Yeah, sadly. But,
that was the beginning of the end.
Is that when you found XFCE and Ubuntu then?
It is, yes. Yeah, up until then I was using GNOME, like most folks, I guess. But once they started changing things, and then we had the whole GNOME 3.
Yeah, I mean, have you used much? Have you used GNOME 3 much at all? Have you?
No, I've tried to and given up on it.
Yeah, same. I mean, I was an XFCE user anyway, so it was a bit of a lost cause on me. But Unity and GNOME 3 just disasters, if you ask me. So anyway, the main reason that I suggested that we get you on was because you sent us quite a long email. Well, not long, but quite in-depth email about the differences between symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. Now, I'm a bit thick, and it was a bit moonspeak to me. So I thought we'd get you on to try and explain in a little bit more plain English what exactly is the difference between symmetric and asymmetric, and what's better, and what should we be using. So what do you think?
You should be using both, and you'll probably be using both without knowing about it if you use something like PGP or GPG. Okay. Can I do this by way of analogy? Because it'd probably be easier, I think.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Let's think about padlocks, because everybody knows what a padlock is, and we know they keep things secure. The most modern padlocks are the sort where if you just click them, they actually lock, and you just need the key to unlock them. But older-fashioned padlocks and some of the more high-security ones, you actually have to use a key to lock them, and then the same key, obviously, to unlock them. But it's two different movements, yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
Now, symmetric encryption is what it sounds, really. If you're thinking about symmetry, if you're looking in a mirror and looking at something that's symmetric, one side of your face is the same as the other side of your face, except opposite. So we're talking about this. When we're talking about symmetric encryption, we're talking about a process that's the exact opposite, the exact reverse. So in symmetric encryption, if Gareth wanted to start sending messages to Joe using symmetric encryption, Gareth and Joe would go down to the local hardware store and buy a padlock. It'd be one of these nice padlocks that you need to turn the key both ways. Every time you buy a padlock, you get two keys. You always get a spare key with a padlock. So Gareth would keep one key, Joe would keep the other key, and then they'd go their separate ways in the world. When it came time for Gareth to send Joe an email, Gareth would put his message into a stout metal box, put the padlock on, and lock it with his key. Okay? You then get the box taken to a courier company who would take it across the world to Joe. Joe would take his key, unlock the padlock, and retrieve the message. So that's basically what symmetric encryption is. You're sharing an algorithm, a computing algorithm, in this case represented by the padlock. You've got your own keys, but they're identical keys, and they work on the same algorithm but produce different results, the exact opposite result. One encrypts, one decrypts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
That was a great analogy. That was very good.
Okay. That's the easy one.
Okay.
Now, if we're being realistic about it, there's still a couple of things I need pointing out there. Firstly, in real life, you would never use the exact same set of parameters for your algorithm each time you did the encryption and decryption process. There are mathematical processes available that allow the encryption to be attacked. So even though you're using the same basic algorithm, and this is where our analogy with the padlock breaks down a bit, you'd feed it slightly different numbers to start with, but your keys would still carry on working. Okay? Perhaps if you were thinking of it as an analogy, what it would be is instead of you sharing just the one padlock, you'd go into the hardware store, buy a whole bunch of padlocks, share the keys between the two of you. Yeah, and you could do it that way.
Okay, so what you're saying is each time you send a communication, an email, for example, you both get sent the same key. Is that a way to look at it, or is that one?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a key, and you will also have something called a nonce, which isn't what it sounds like in the UK.
Now then.
But basically, if you think about it as a random number generator, I think both of you have written code before in your lives, and if you've got a random number generator, you'll give it a seed value, and from the seed value, then it will spit out a bunch of supposedly or pseudo-random numbers. Okay, but providing you plug in the same seed value, you're always going to get the same random numbers out. Yeah.
Okay.
Bear in mind that the only coding I've ever done is 10 print hello 20 go to
basic
10.
man.
Right.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I did Amstrad back in the day when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're slightly muddying the waters with that, but I mean, the basics are that you've got a shared algorithm, you've got shared keys which are identical keys, okay, and it works sweetly like that. But in real life, it's not quite that straightforward.
Now, the symmetric analogy you gave made perfect sense, and that to me describes how basically GPG works, right? With the public and the private key. So
no,
what?
No.
Okay.
What we're talking about here is having two identical keys. In public key cryptography, which is asymmetric encryption, you're talking about having two different keys.
So
okay,
one to encrypt, one to decrypt.
Right.
Yeah. So when we talk about symmetric encryption, we're talking about the same algorithm being used and the same keys being used, but because they are, I'm struggling here to put it in words that are clear. The keys are identical. Okay, so you both got to have the same key. You both use the same key. Using the same algorithm, it just reverses the process. So it's the same, it's the same as looking in a mirror with your face. One half of your face is identical to the other half of your face, but it's the inverse.
Okay.
The mirror reflection, yeah?
Okay, so how is that different from asymmetric then? What's different about asymmetric encryption?
Right. Think about padlocks again, and imagine the grief it is that everybody has to go and buy different padlocks and share different keys. What asymmetric encryption is, in a padlock analogy, is there's a company that's invented a universal padlock. Okay, so you've got one padlock to rule them all. Now, the thing that's different about this particular padlock is it's got two keyholes in. Okay, so you've got one keyhole that you use to lock it and one key that you use to lock it. But in the process of locking it, the actual mechanism within the padlock changes somehow. So perhaps the tumblers move around based on where the pins are on the key, which means that there is only one specific key that fits in the unlock hole. Okay, so you've got a padlock. Everyone can have the same padlock in the world, but you've got two holes in it, one key for locking, one key for unlocking, and depending on which key is used to lock it, only one specific key will unlock it, and vice versa, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can imagine that we could do exactly the same process as before, that Gareth's got one key, so let's say the key to do the locking. Joe's got one key, the key to do the unlocking, and you could actually proceed exactly as before. So you put your message into a box, put the padlock on it, lock it, send it over, and Gareth could unlock it.
Right.
But that isn't the problem that public key encryption, asymmetric encryption, really is trying to solve. The big issue that we've skirted over so far is actual key distribution, and that's the biggest issue and remains one of the biggest issues in cryptography.
Well, the way you do it now is you either, if you know if you meet in person, you can actually physically give them a copy, give them like a thumb drive of your key that only they would have, or you can, email it to them, or you can publish it on your website, or you can use it. Was it the MIT page where you can actually upload your key so people can search for you for your key. I don't know how the best way to do it though. I'm assuming the best way would be to physically say, here's a CD or here's a thumb drive with my key, and physically hand it to the person. That would probably be the most secure, I would guess, right?
It would be, but then you get into the question of if you've got physical access to the person to give them a key, then you've also got physical access to them to give them the message.
Well, at that time, yeah. But supposing I went to LA for a holiday and gave Gareth my key and then came back to London,
right?
That's when that would make sense.
Yeah.
But how do we solve that problem? He's thousands of miles away from me. How do I give him my key securely?
All right. We're sort of mixing up the two, symmetric and asymmetric, somewhat here. I mean, if you're in a position where you can give someone a key, then we might as well be talking about symmetric encryption,
right?
Where you've each got the same key, no one else knows what it is, and you can use it quite happily between the two of you without any interference. Okay. Is that better than using public key asymmetric then? If you can physically give them the key. It can be. It depends. Sorry, there's a lot of it depends. The whole of cryptography is it depends. Depends what you're trying to do. If you think about the fact you shouldn't be reusing whole keys all the time, it's perfectly possible for Gareth to burn a CD with a lot of random data on it, okay, like 700 megs worth of random data, and give it to Joe, and then start encrypting using that random data as the key. But at some stage, you're going to run out of key space. You're going to actually have worked through the key, depending on the number of documents you send to Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you with me?
Right.
And then you're back to the key distribution problem.
You have to start all over.
Yeah. Now, until the 60s and 70s, this wasn't really considered a huge issue because cryptography was mainly used by military and governments, right. Where key distribution wasn't an issue because they've got secure couriers going around the world, and they could actually distribute fresh keys to people on a regular basis, and it wasn't considered a big issue. Public key cryptography came about because it actually negates the need to share a private secret, which in the past you would have had to do. You'd have a secret nobody else must know about, apart from the sender and the recipient. With public key cryptography, as you said, Gareth, you publish your public key. Anyone can see that. Anyone can use it. But all they can do with that key is actually encrypt stuff for you.
Right. So they can send me a message using my key, and only I can decrypt that message.
That's right, because they're using this wonderful padlock that's got two holes in. Right. One hole locks it, and that's your public key, but only your private key will unlock it.
So let's move away from the whole symmetric asymmetric deal, and let's talk about the best software that you. Now, obviously, GPG is open source; it's freely available. I'm assuming you would use that, right? Is that what you use at home? What is your encryption workflow? If you were to maybe begin encrypting secure communication between somebody else, what software would you use, and what would be the best practices?
Yeah, I would be using GPG. A lot of people claim that anything open source is going to be secure inherently. Because there's a lot of eyes looking at the code. That's not necessarily the case because you don't know, unless you've looked at it yourself, you don't know whether that is true. And you just need to look at bugs in open source software that are sometimes found months or years after the event to realise that isn't the case. But having said that, obviously an open source product is going to be far better than a closed source product because you're never going to find out about issues in closed source products. So another sort of reason not to use things like BitLocker, for instance, on Windows.
Or Windows itself.
Or Windows itself, yeah.
Yes.
Or Mac OS.
No.
Well, this is a conversation I've heard over the weeks on this fine podcast, and there seems to be a little bit of a sort of dark spot there for Gareth. That he can't actually see the sort of the fact that it's closed source might pose some issues, but
exactly. You can, no matter what we've talked about on this episode and for the last 20 odd weeks, it doesn't matter. You could have the best encryption in the world, but if the operating system you're using is proprietary, then you may as well not bother. As far as I'm concerned,
it's not just the proprietary operating system, though. I mean, it's anything. I mean, it could. You don't know whether your distribution of Linux is a backdoor or not. You have no idea.
Well, I personally have no idea, but I know that if anybody could find that, and anybody could find that who knew about it, could look at the code and find it. And imagine they found
not necessarily
a backdoor. Well, I mean, the source code is out there. All you have to do is study it. If
the source code was compiled by a compiler that was designed to place a backdoor in that software, you got nothing to find.
Well, I think you're clutching at straws there, Gareth. Anyway, so Paddy, back to your.
That's all right. As I said up front, it's a question of trust. The whole thing is a question of trust, isn't it? I mean, yeah. I would trust open source software more than I would trust proprietary software. But as Gareth rightly says, and it's a long-standing thing from Ken Thompson going back years about backdooring compilers. I mean, you just don't. At some stage, you've got to either just accept that you're never going to be secure, or just say, okay, these guys I can probably trust, and we don't worry about it too much. But yeah. You're quite right. Both of you, in your own way, are quite right. I mean, you're never going to get total security. You're never going to be able to have total control over your software stack, and you sure as hell ain't going to have control over your hardware stack, which is something that sort of doesn't that often get talked about. But I mean, who designed the chips in your computer? I mean, who fabbed it? I mean, do you know that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Yeah, that's something we were going to get into a bit later, but I suppose we could get into now. I mean, what in terms of hardware backdoors and hardware exploits, like we heard potentially with Intel processors. I mean, what do you think about that then?
I think that none of us actually know enough to make a judgment on it. We know if we know it's possible. Which suggests that it's been done or being done, because anything that's possible will be done by somebody somewhere along the line. But short of going back to pieces of paper and pigeons, there's what can you do? I mean, it's probably not the answer that you're looking for, but there is no totally secure or totally provably secure system out there unless you've built the whole thing from scratch, unless you've wired up a board yourself, not use proprietary or chips fabbed by anybody else. And I mean, no one builds their own computers on breadboards anymore. It just doesn't happen. So,
yeah. So going back anyway to your particular way of doing things, if you wanted to send an encrypted email, how would you do it? Would you use GPG on the command line, or how would you do it?
I probably would, although there's some perfectly good plugins for popular mail packages like for Thunderbird. But we're looking back at the holistic thing again. I mean, if you're using programs like Thunderbird on your PC, you've got data sat on your PC, fine, you'll have encrypted it, so even you can't read it if you're using asymmetric encryption, okay? But the document will have had to have got onto your PC at some stage for you to encrypt it in the first place. Are you sure that copy has been deleted properly? Are you sure you shredded it, or whatever it is your operating system does? So yeah, it's all down to trust. But yeah, I would be using GPG or PGP if
now, are you using GPG like you mentioned Thunderbird with the what's the name of the plugin you plug in there to
see? Enigmail.
Enigmail, yeah, that's right. Are you using Enigmail, or are you doing it directly from the command line and then cutting and pasting into the email client of your choice?
Or, more importantly, are you not even bothering because it's too much hassle?
Yeah. well, that's the big issue, though, right? That's why most people don't use encryption, because it's a pain in the ass to use it.
It is. It is a pain in the ass. The software is a pain in the ass, and considering how long it's been around, that's a fairly shocking state of affairs. But I mean, none of these systems were built with security in mind. I mean, that's the bottom line here that we're talking about. If the whole internet was not built with security in mind, it was built with a variety of things in mind, like resilience, being able to root around problems and what have you. And it was built on openness and resilience. It wasn't built with security in mind and anonymity in mind. So to actually backport protocols, I mean, we talked about email earlier, And as you've seen from all the Snowden stuff, hopefully people are a bit more aware that metadata can tell you a hell of a lot about what's going on with somebody. And often it's the metadata is more important than the actual contents.
Right.
And that's the way of checking people's relationships and what have you.
And that's the excuse that they use, though. We're not reading or harvesting any content. It's just the metadata.
Absolutely. But from their point of view, that's the useful stuff.
Right.
Very often that's the really useful stuff. And it's the stuff that by default, the way things have evolved on the internet, the way things were designed, is very difficult to get rid of. I mean, if you send someone an email, metadata about that email is going to be in the clear, regardless of whether you encrypt the content of your email message or not. It's going to be readable by everybody along that gets the message as it hops along through all the pipework. So it's very much like the Windows that Joe's been so praising throughout this podcast, that Windows was never designed with security in mind, and they've had huge problems, obviously, with viruses and all sorts of things over the years, trying to actually retrofit a security system into Windows. And we've got the same thing on the internet today. It was designed to be open, resilient, and a whole host of other things, but it wasn't designed from a security perspective.
So let's just say that I'm going to communicate with Paddy. So we exchange public keys. I encrypt my end. I send an email to you. The content of the email is encrypted. So if anyone wants to take a look at it on its passage through the pipes to you, it's just nonsense, right? It's just garbled nonsense. It's all encrypted, so they're not going to be able to read it. But they are going to see that at this time on this date, I sent this to you. And depending on how often I communicate with you, they're going to be able to build a very detailed picture on what we may or may not be talking about.
Absolutely. Yep.
So what's the best thing to do here? What about something like BitMessage?
Interesting. BitMessage, for folks who don't know about it, is a peer-to-peer communications protocol.
Right.
It's fairly new.
Wouldn't that kind of sidestep the whole metadata issue?
Technically, yes, but there's a few big buts with BitMessage and protocols like BitMessage. I mean, from a design perspective, BitMessage has taken a design decision that everybody gets everything. Okay, so
right.
Anytime you send a message through the BitMessage system, fine, nobody can see the metadata. It's hidden. But the cost of that is that everybody tries to decrypt every message. So you can see that it's as a proposition, it simply won't scale. I'm not sure how many people are using BitMessage at the moment, but if you look at the stats of the usage, there's a sort of few hundred messages every day, a few hundred broadcasts and what have you going out there. And that's fine and that's tolerable. But if they tried to actually get a lot more users using it, and in particular users on mobile devices, which have got obviously less processing power and generally an awful lot less bandwidth. I think you're probably spoiled a bit in the States with LTE compared with this country. Right. But the size of the pipe coming into your phone, the storage, the processor, you imagine that any time someone in Thailand BitMessages someone in Singapore,
you're going to get it.
You get it. Yeah. You try and decrypt it. You have to keep hold of it so you can forward it on to other people if they request it from you.
Right.
I mean, it's all the physical constraints around that sort of broadcast system where everybody gets everything. But now I understand why they've done that, because it does mean that theoretically you've got total anonymity because no one can see what messages you're actually getting that are intended for you.
So basically, when I fire up BitMessage, it starts receiving messages from everyone on the BitMessage network. So anyone who's sending a message, I'll get it. But
that's right,
so it basically comes in, an encrypted message will come in. My software will look at it and think, "Oh, this is not for you. I can't decrypt it. Forward it on." Right?
Yeah. Keep hold of it for, I think it's 2 days, 2.5 days on BitMessage.
2 days.
I think one of the reasons they sort of kept it fairly low is obviously the whole volume issue. You just can't manage it. But
so the more people that use BitMessage, the slower or more clunky it's going to get. It's going to get almost unusable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But as for the mobile problem, could that not be solved by running the application on your home machine and then your mobile device communicating with your home machine securely, so that any messages that are meant for you then get forwarded onto your mobile device from home to anywhere in the world, and anything you send gets sent back to your home computer, processed there, etc. I mean, could that not be a solution to that problem?
It's a technical solution, but the question is whether it's a viable proposition for Joe Public. And when we're talking about this whole topic, and it can seem a bit esoteric to people. And as you said just a moment ago, Gareth, about GPG being a pain in the arse to use still,
right.
after all these years. If things aren't easy to use, if things don't work out of the box like your wonderful Apple, then people aren't going to use them.
Yeah, it's the whole convenience versus security issue. Now, obviously, if you've taken that step and you've started to use GPG and you understand how it works and you've been using it for a while, it's not a big deal. But for, Mr. and Mrs. Joe Average looking at it for the first time, they're going to be, I'm not using this. What, are you crazy?
I really resent being called average in public all the time.
You know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. Yeah, so is there any other simple way? When I first heard about BitMessage, I thought, hey, this really solves the problem of it being a pain in the arse to send encrypted communication. And I thought maybe this model, although maybe not this particular bit of software, but this idea could be the solution to that. But are there any other possible solutions to make it easy? Or is the easiest thing to just use a plugin for Thunderbird?
I think peer-to-peer, going down the BitMessage route, is the way we're going to have to move if we want a sensible, secure environment. There are things they could do with BitMessage itself or very similar products which would actually reduce the security somewhat, but would provide a far more usable experience, a more scalable experience. For instance, instead of sending the whole messages out, they just send headers out.
Yeah.
So it's basically just the metadata going out, and then when you decrypt some metadata,
it's interesting.
Points to a message for you, you can go and download that from somewhere else. But then obviously someone can see, which they might not be able to decrypt the messages, but they will be able to see that the fact that you have specifically requested that message.
Now, I got a bit message from a listener a while ago, and I think we talked about this on the show, Joe, where he said that he uses GPG to encrypt the message, then he will cut and paste that into BitMessage, then send it.
Wasn't that Paddy?
I don't know. Was that you, Paddy? I don't think it was you.
No, that wasn't me.
No, it was somebody else.
It seems a sensible thing to be doing at the moment, to be honest, though, because the BitMessage guys, despite sort of frequent requests from them, have yet to have a decent security audit from someone who knows what they're talking about.
So
they do make that very clear on their website, don't they? That they're looking for that to happen.
So what that's doing basically, then the BitMessage is taking care of the metadata, and the GPG is taking care of the encryption. So if you were to do that twofold, you're in pretty good shape, right, Paddy?
At the moment, it seems like a fairly prudent and a reasonable way to approach things. But if the encryption on BitMessage is broken, full stop, which we don't know because no one's actually looked at it, and I'm not suggesting that it is, then if it's broken for the whole system, it's broken for the metadata. So you're not actually gaining a great deal.
Right.
But we're back going. You end up going in circles, and at some stage you've got to say, for my needs, then this is sufficient. And say the big problem with BitMessage is the fact that it just simply is not going to scale, which is sad. But at least people are thinking about these things and making efforts.
Right, and people. There's been obviously a lot of what they call them the cypherpunks, the people that have been into crypto for a long time who've been working on this, but it's only really popped into the regular computer user or the public's mind in the last 6 months since the whole Snowden thing. So let's as we're kind of wrapping it up here, because we're kind of coming to the end of our time here. Let's talk briefly about if you wanted to send completely secure messages. What would you do? You mentioned earlier about using a live disk and maybe using an air gap between the machine that you would use purely for encryption. What would be the best practice to do that if you were inclined to do so?
If I was inclined to do so, very much what we were talking about earlier, totally separate machine.
Maybe a netbook or something, right?
Yeah, get a netbook, ideally without any form of permanent storage in it whatsoever. So take the hard disk out if it's got one. Use an up-to-date, always an up-to-date Linux distribution like Tails or Unix, one of the distributions that are built for secure access. Go down to your local coffee shop, don't be seen, and do it from there. But as I'm sure everyone can imagine, it's a pain in the arse.
Right.
And unless you're 007, very few people are going to do it.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, and to be honest with you, I mean, most people have no need to do that, right? Because they're not, sending secrets or anything. It's just they just want some kind of private communication that they can engage in. It's not like they're up to anything shady or up to no good. They just want privacy, right?
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing you've got to remember is that all through this conversation, we've been talking tech. We've been talking about technical solutions to technical problems, when in reality the problems are largely political.
Right.
Now, whether there are any political solutions is doubtful as well, because power never gives power away, and we'll always seek to gain more power. Obviously, depending on your political persuasion, you might think the government can be a force for good as opposed to a force for evil, but nothing that we've spoken about or that Greenwald's put out from Snowden really is focused on the technical side of things. As far as I can see, the whole Snowden debate has been about trying to encourage political change and oversight and what have you for these agencies. Yeah, I guess it depends where you sit in how you view the political system, whether you believe that oversight will actually be effective, or even if we get some, whether it'll be long-lasting. But someone will always be trying to get at your data if they can. If the facilities exist to get it,
sure,
then obviously someone will try and exploit it. So.
You could have the best encryption on the planet that could never be broken, but all you need is a keylogger to get your password, and you're good to go, right?
Absolutely.
If they have physical access to your machine, regardless of what kind of software you're using, it's a moot point. It's done.
Yeah.
One final thing though, we often talk about how the likes of the NSA and other government agencies have probably got hardware and software that is years ahead of what the public have got. So, I mean, if that's true, you hear things about how if you use the best crypto, it can't be cracked for so many years, so many thousand years or whatever, even with the best hardware. But how far ahead of current hardware would they have to be for it to be trivial for them to crack even high-level encryption, do you think?
No, that's an evil question, Joe. So how long is a piece of string? That is really difficult. I mean, the obvious answers talk about quantum computing, because it's been shown that a quantum computer can break some of this stuff quite easily. But equally, when we're talking about mathematical structures at the end of the day, and often when we're talking about cryptography, and particularly when we're talking about public key, asymmetric encryption, decryption, we're talking about being able to factor numbers very quickly, because the whole thing is based around being able to keep two large primes secret, fundamentally, which is why I was trying to do analogies of padlocks, because when I start talking about maths, people's eyes glaze over. But there have been rapid advances. I mean, you think about technology, although it grows, the processing power, what have you, grows over the years, and we all know about Moore's law and what have you.
Yeah.
It tends to sort of go, it doesn't tend to have huge jumps, if you like. I mean, the PC I've got set on my desk, 10 years ago might have been 386, 286, whatever it was. And from there to what I've got now, it's fairly nice curve on it, processing power-wise and what have you. But there's no sort of huge leaps there. When we're talking about maths, which cryptography is based upon, all it takes is for someone to figure out a new way of doing some construct, and you're actually blown out of the water. Yeah. It's because we're talking about big leaps as opposed to sort of gradual incremental changes. So you could talk about processing power getting faster. You could talk about the NSA having this huge data center facility in Utah and make assumptions based on the state of art of computing that we can look at today and think about where they would be if they had access to X number of CPUs and whatever. That all goes away if someone has worked out how to do factoring much more efficiently, for instance. So we're kind of looking in the wrong place, really, to actually answer the question. But that's why I say it's an evil question, Joe, because it is a huge unknown. Yeah. I mean, we know that quantum computing, there's an algorithm been written for cracking keys on quantum computing, and we know that quantum computing is progressing at certain speed, and it's very slow speed. They've only been able to build a very small number of qubit computers in the labs so far.
Publicly,
but if someone's actually,
they say conservatively they're about 30 years ahead of what's publicly available. I mean, if you look at the the SR-71, the Blackbird, which was built and flown in the 50s and was finally released to the public in like the late 70s. They said, "Oh yeah, this is what we've got." So usually, their technology or whatever they have, conservatively, is about 20 to 30 years ahead of what we publicly have. But you're absolutely right, Paddy. It is. We're playing the guessing game. We don't know. It's all speculation, but it is likely that they have some pretty serious stuff hidden away. But if they can't break your encryption and they want to read your stuff, all they need to do is own your machine, and they get your password and they're good to go.
Yeah, rubber truncheon every time. Does the job.
Or worse, they beat it out of you. What's your password? Or something like that. But I'm assuming it's a lot easier just to crack the encryption. If you have that kind of raw computing power at your disposal, so then you don't have to pay visits to anyone, and you can find out what they're talking about from the safety of your or the comfort, rather, not safety, of your office.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's a little bizarre having the conversation we're having, because if you think about it, we're like three ordinary white guys in Western democracies, which aren't perfect, do all sorts of shady shit, I know, particularly the guys over your side of the water. So for us, a lot of this is theoretical conversation.
Right.
We'd like stuff to be private, but at the end of the day, it's not going to kill us if it's not.
Sure,
unless we're doing something the government objects to. But there are parts of the world, obviously, that isn't the case.
Right.
So, yeah, it's...
No, I mean, you're absolutely correct.
Essentially, you're saying first world problems.
Yeah.
In a way, it is.
But like,
there's a real need for decent crypto for people who aren't living in our situation.
Sure.
Who aren't living in a totalitarian state like the UK.
The UK. Well, it's like, the thing is, though, I mean, if I have encrypted volumes on my computer, and they would attack those and break them and get in there and see what I have, ultimately I'm like, well, so what? There's nothing, it's just nonsense. Who cares, right? But if I'm like a political activist living in a real totalitarian state where, if I publish a blog post, I could go to prison for 30 years, it's a whole different deal.
Absolutely, which I was trying to drag it around to politics slightly earlier, because for us, I mean, things will change, no doubt, and these agencies will get more oversight and what have you. But the political process, the power structures will remain. And as an individual, I don't think there's a huge amount you can actually do within our system to change that. Whereas in other parts of the world, where the systems aren't so ingrained, then there is that possibility. So they do take it a little bit more seriously and cracking down on folks.
All right. Any final questions, Joe?
No, I think that's about it for now.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Paddy, or Devolvify, We've really appreciated you coming on the show, and you've given us some amazing information, and it was great to talk to you. Thank you so much, and you're welcome back anytime.
You're more than welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, guys.
Well, Joe, what do you think of that? What a great interview. It was so cool for Paddy, or Wifi, to come by and talk to us. That was awesome.
Yeah, I was really impressed. He said that he'd never done anything like that before. He's never been on mic or radio or anything like that. I was quite surprised by that. I thought he had some experience. He said he was a bit nervous, but I think he did really well.
Totally.
So, yeah.
He was like an old hand, like he'd done this a million times before. But yeah, I think that was the first time, and he did tremendously well. Lots of great info too, and we might get him back on the show at a later date if there are more developments in the whole crypto deal that goes on. Because even though a lot of people will find this boring, I find it fascinating.
Yeah, and his take on it was really cool as well.
Yeah, it was awesome. All right, Joe, did we get any feedback this week?
We didn't get much. We just got a bit of trolling, really, a bit of quite transparent trolling that I wasn't even going to mention, but you put it in there. So someone calling themselves Smelly Flange.
Yeah, what a nice name that is, by the way.
Yeah, and as I explained to Gareth off air, flange means lady parts.
We were.
Yes. But anyway, he said, I have now raised Gareth from elevated to high on the Apple fanboy meter.
What?
I think that you godlike status on that. And then he links this Apple fanboy advisory system. Low risk of fanboy attacks up to severe. It's like the terrorist alert thing, whatever.
Right.
And he said, in this picture, and this picture will show you Macs are for hipsters and real men use Windows. And then he links to another picture of...
Yeah, actually, this picture is very funny, actually. I like this picture a lot. It was cool.
I just got a pop-up of that one.
I know, I hate that shit. This tiny pic thing. I'll grab the picture and we'll put it up for real so listeners can look at the picture without having to deal with the nonsense pop-up thing.
Yeah, the main difference between PCs and Macs. PCs, Large Hadron Collider Controller, and the largest, most complex experiment in history, used by the most brilliant scientists in the world. And it's got the Gentoo logo, the OpenSUSE logo, the Fedora logo, and the Windows logo. And then Macs and just some hipsters in a coffee shop.
And then it says, I'm a faggot.
Yeah, coming out of the Finder logo.
I know. This picture, though, this picture says nothing about the difference between Macs and PCs, but it does say a lot about the person who made it.
Well, it does say a lot about, obviously, yeah.
The person who put this together, it speaks volumes about their psychological, makeup.
It speaks volumes about their virginity as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, a lot of issues. But like I said earlier, there's only two kinds of people in the world. There's Mac users and wannabe Mac users. And that's all there is to it.
This is what Mac users actually believe. Yeah. I don't know, anyway. But yeah, if you fancy trolling us or sending us some non-troll feedback, then either leave a comment on the website, mindsetcentral.com, or Facebook, or Google+, or BitMessage, or email us, mindsetcentral@gmail.com.
That's it. All right, Joe, thank you so much. Thank you again also to Paddy. Great to come on the show. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week with more news, conversations, and all of the above. Until then, farewell, good brothers.
See you later.